When Nintendo decided to launch a portable gaming system with exchangeable cartridges in 1989, it did so with a device that at the time wasn't exactly top of the line. Lacking a color screen, a backlight, or a powerful processor was technically overshadowed by competitors with more advanced features. But with that simple design, great battery life, and low price, it ended up taking the world completely by storm and sold over 60 million units worldwide, cementing it as a top choice for gaming on the go. The topic is of course the original Game Boy. This is my unit from when I was a kid, and anyone who has ever played on one knows the screen is the biggest drawback. With no backlighting and a very slow refresh rate, it pales in comparison to modern screens. Fortunately, there are now many options to fix this, and this is one of them. It's upgrade time. Welcome back to Rick's Random Retro, where we shine a light on the subject. So this is my childhood Game Boy that certainly has seen better days. The case is yellow, but above all the biggest problem is that screen. Sure, it exhibits all the characteristics of all original screens in that it's not lit and has some pretty terrible motion blur. But it also has some lines or damaged pixels that's been there for many years, likely from my poor handling of it when I was younger. And the lens cover for the screen doesn't stay on anymore thanks to that dried out glue. All in all, it's a perfect candidate for a screen and case replacement. And that replacement is the Funnyplaying IPS version 2 screen kit, featuring a brand new LCD panel with a custom driver board that's been designed for this specific application. We'll go over the features more in detail once the installation is completed. But before we start taking things apart, just as a reminder, this is the experience you have, or had, using the original screen in the Game Boy, keeping in mind the state of my personal unit. While it's hard to capture, it really is terrible by the standards of today. Which is no surprise, obviously, as screen technology has come a long way since the late 80s when this was developed. And let's not forget here that I have a large studio light pointed right at the screen. If I turn those off, you get a better sense of what the experience was trying to find just the right angle and light to see the screen. I got various accessories through the years to try and make it better or allow it to be played in the dark, but nothing really worked very well. There was only so much you could do. Anyone who's ever traveled with a Game Boy knows the struggle of providing a consistent light. The memory of trying to play in the car while streetlights roll by giving off short bursts of light is still etched in my brain from my youth. But in an effort to keep costs down, which I'd say was a major point in the sales success it did enjoy, the screen was a necessary concession. Looking at more advanced screen setups in, for example, the Sega Game Gear, it had other drawbacks such as an enormous appetite for batteries. The Game Boy had an unrivaled battery life by comparison. And don't worry, I won't be doing anything to my original case, as Funnyplaying also sells full replacement shells. So this will be a fully reversible modification and will really only need a few parts out of my original unit. The shell has a nice solid feel to it and really seems to mimic the plastic and texture feel of the original. One of the obvious differences here, of course, is that it's missing the printed on Game Boy logo. While it does stand out not being there, I do understand its omission as well, some shells do have it. Not all aftermarket shells are created equally, however, and this just seems to feel very good in the hand so far. We will see after it's all put together if that holds up. One of the major things with this case is that you don't have to do any modifications to it. The primary reason for those modifications is that the screen for this kit is slightly larger than in stock. Not by much, but I saw a number such as 11% being quoted, and that means if you were to use a shell that hasn't been made to fit this larger screen, you'll have to do some plastic cutting. With this shell though, no such cutting or modification should be needed. Along with the shell, I also added in new buttons, membranes, a speaker, and a glass screen cover. This will end up being basically a new Game Boy by the time we're done. Now, it's time for the screwdriver. To start taking apart our Game Boy, of course, we'll take the batteries out. And there goes that screen lens, we'll worry about that later. Right now, we'll just take out the mismatched batteries, don't worry about it, I'm a professional. And we have a set of screws around the edges of the Game Boy and also in the battery compartment. They all use a tri-wing or security driver, if you will, to get those out. So, first step is to undo all the screws around the corners and in there. And once all those screws are out, the Game Boy kind of comes apart pretty easily. The first thing we'll notice is that there is a ribbon cable connecting the motherboard with the LCD driver panel board. That has to be detached as well so we can separate the two halves, and it slides out just like that. We now have the two parts of the Game Boy separated again, with the motherboard on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is the LCD with the actual LCD driver panel board on the back here, with the speaker of course too. Now that we have those halves separated, we actually have to take the motherboard out as well. This is really the only part we actually need from the original Game Boy. So first off, we'll undo and remove the speaker jack here, or headphone jack, and then take the entire motherboard out as well. And as a note, this actually does use regular screws, just regular Phillips screws. So now that we have the motherboard removed, we can see here that it actually goes in and holds the cards and everything. But this is a good time to give this a bit of a cleaning, because this is the first time this has been opened really ever. So a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, cleaning out the contacts and everything is a good time to do that. Just clean out any gunk that's been accumulated over many, many decades of use. And one of the things I like to do when I do these kind of projects is to make sure everything kind of test fits before we even put everything back together for real. So what we're going to do now is actually put the motherboard and the headphone jack or connector into the new case, and then just kind of do a test fit and make sure everything works. And above all, then hook up the LCD driver board for the LCD and make sure it works, because before you assemble, you kind of want to make sure that everything actually works. There's nothing worse than putting everything together and then realizing that something doesn't work and having to take it apart again. So what we're doing now is just basically hooking everything up and making sure that it works. And yes, the initial test is good. We actually do have an image, which is a very good sign. Good place to start. But to be extra sure, it's worth also testing with the cartridge to make sure the cartridge slot is actually reading games correctly as well. And looking good. Success. Of course, there's no sound because the speaker hasn't been soldered on yet. So right now, this is what you see, is what you get. It's not a very functional Game Boy. It's a little bit of a cyberpunk style right now, I suppose, but doesn't matter. It actually does work, and that's the important part. Next is the installation of the lens cover, which is a glass this time. Should provide a little bit of a clearer image than the original plastic one. So we'll have to just kind of fit that carefully here. We will leave the wrap on here, or the shrink wrap, whatever you want to call it, on top here, until we're done, just to protect it from scratches and smudges, until we're completely done with the build. Like a glove. Next step is to install the actual LCD panel, and actually comes with this very handy alignment bracket. It uses basically the posts on the case to make sure that you have a perfect alignment, because otherwise getting that screen just right in that case can be really, really difficult. But here it just kind of snaps right into place. And also make sure that the ribbon cable is not getting pinched or anything like that. So you got kind of the perfect alignment every time. Nice. One thing that's actually missing here is the gasket that goes between the screen and the case itself. I actually forgot to install it when I was filming this, but I did go back later and fix that. So this is a kind of an adhesive strip that goes, again, between the LCD panel and the case itself, just to protect the screen. So that's really important to get in there, but it is in there in the final build. Next in the order of business is to install the new buttons. So I opted to put all new buttons into this build because the original ones are pretty grody, and these have a real nice feel to it. Feel pretty close to stock, so they just slide in where the buttons were. They can only go in one way, so that makes it pretty easy to put all those into place. And then we also have the membranes, which is of course what makes the connection between the buttons to the actual control board, or the LCD driver board slash button board, if you will. And those pop right on here, behind each button. Setting that aside, the next step here now is to take the LCD driver board, or the button board, or the actual brains of this whole LCD panel, and we need to install the speaker. So we have a replacement Funnyplaying speaker here. It requires just soldering of 2 wires, just positive and negative. You can use the original speaker if you want, but in this case I opted to get a new one because the old one was pretty crusty. So as you can see, you can either look or look away in disgust. I am not good at soldering. I am practicing still. I'm getting better. But this is kind of like a hack job. It's just a very simple soldering job, but I'm still practicing. So please forgive my poor technique or handling here, but it does get the job done. Kind of. Once the speaker is installed, the next step is to install the driver board into the shell itself. As you can notice, the shell has a lot of posts here that it uses to align the board correctly into the case. It makes it fairly easy, unless you're fumbling around like I am, to get it lined up. And something that's actually quite important, besides not pinching the speaker wire of course, which also has a little groove that it fits into, is that there's a lot of screws around the edges, and it's important to line that up correctly and apply equal pressure around the board. If the screws here aren't tight enough, then the buttons on the other side won't make a good connection with the board, and you'll have kind of like a sloppy button feel, if you will. So it's actually quite important to screw these down quite tight. You can see I'm testing here, and actually can feel the buttons being pretty loose until all the screws are tightened down, so that's an important step. With the board installed, one of the very finicky pieces here is to get the actual LCD ribbon cable attached to the board. This was not the first try, but it eventually got there. It's just a little inflexible, and it takes just a lot of force to get it into the actual connector. Of course, an important step: without this connected, there is no screen. There's no screen that works. So that has to get in there, and it's pretty finicky, but we got there in the end. Now then, the time has come to actually install the motherboard and the speaker connector into the back of the shell. This is the really only piece that's left of our original Game Boy. Considering everything else replaced, that is the one piece, and can truly be called the actual Game Boy. This is where the actual motherboard or circuitry for the Game Boy itself is, the logic that handles the games, etc., etc. And it just takes a whole bunch of Phillips again to get that back into the shell. One of the final steps is to connect the ribbon cable that goes from the motherboard to our new driver board, and this one also is a little finicky. On one side it's not too difficult to get it in here, but then hooking it up to the front of the case is, yeah, a bit of a challenge. It's very finicky, but you can get there eventually. There's just not a lot of room to work with because the ribbon's cable is not very long. You also have to make sure that it's not pinching, but we should have that satisfying snap when it goes together. And at this point now it feels already very solid. But like anything else, I like doing a quick test, putting in our very professional looking matching batteries here, to make sure that it actually works before we tighten it together. And look at that, we still have success. Fantastic. That means now it's time to put all the screws in. Again, using that tri-wing security driver to get all these screws in. And we gotta just go through it one at a time. And here we are. The final test. Everything's put back together. Let's see what we got. Still success. So we can't miss that super important step. There we go. Our Game Boy is now fully assembled. So again, let's try it with an actual game to make sure it still works. After we install this. And it booted up. First try. The finished product is nothing short of stunning. The upgraded screen is miles apart from the original one while still retaining that same feel. We have a full backlit modern IPS panel providing a crisp and blur-free gaming experience. The case feels great to hold, and I love the fact this basically takes the Game Boy to the level your memory puts it at without destroying what made it so great in the first place. It's upgraded, but not remade. We have a brightness wheel adjustment, just like the original one, but this screen kit also comes with a few extra tricks, such as a switchable color palette. In fact, there are a total of 36 to choose from if you're feeling picky or want to switch things up once in a while. Ranging from the original yellow/green hue to something that's more mimicking what the later Game Boy Pocket or Lite had, there's something for just about everyone. Simply tap the brightness wheel, then rock it up and down to switch between them. The best feature of the screen, however, has to be the retro pixel mode, which overlays a grid attempting to mimic the look of the original screen. I'd say it goes a very long way towards making this feel like a natural upgrade. Remember, the original screen runs at a resolution of just 160 by 144, making the pixels very visible, and this mode makes the screen feel like a direct replacement, while improving it otherwise in every way. While disabling it is an option simply by holding the brightness wheel, it just feels lacking to my eyes. That said, it's great the options there to toggle it on and off depending on your preference. It certainly looks a lot brighter and crisper with the overlay toggle off. Now then, with the new screen installed, why don't we do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison shot, all through the magic of editing. On the left-hand side is before, and on the right-hand side is after, which I think will be quite apparent. One concern with this upgrade may be the battery life impact now having a fully lit and modern screen. I didn't test this myself, but it stands to reason that the draw here will be higher than stock for him since, well, it needs more juice to keep the screen lit up. Since I use a set of rechargeable batteries, I don't think too much of it, I just kind of charge them and replace them when needed, so your mileage may vary there. So what does this actually cost? Well, I bought all these parts myself and ordered them directly from Funnyplaying. The screen is the biggest piece here, coming in at just over $50. With all the additional parts needed like the bracket, new speaker, and shell, the total comes out to about $70. You may be able to get this cheaper from another source, but that's what it came to for me. If you're not replacing everything like I did, your cost will likely be less as well. Is that worth it though? As someone who likes to tinker, I'd say yes. This was an upgrade to my childhood system, making it infinitely more playable than it was before considering the sorry state it was in. Well, thanks to me. It may not be for everyone though, especially if you prefer to keep your consoles untouched or fully original. As for me though, it was a welcome upgrade to a dear old friend. And it's made me grab my old cartridges once more and play some Game Boy again. In my eyes, this makes a true classic shine even brighter, updating it for the modern age. That's it for this one though, so thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out some of my other ones. You can also find me on my website or on social media. Also be sure to catch me live as I live stream on Thursdays at 8:45 PM Central.